Dr. Jiho Kim rubbed her tired eyes as she sat in front of the massive communication array aboard the research vessel Hanbok. For 3 months she had been listening to the endless static of deep space, hoping to catch even the smallest hint of alien life. The ship floated quietly at the very edge of human territory, far from Earth and the busy colonies. Jiho was a language expert who specialized in alien communication. Her job was to find new civilizations and learn how to talk to them. Most days brought nothing but empty silence from the void of space. But today was different. The quantum receiver suddenly came alive with a strong, clear signal. Jiho's heart jumped with excitement. After months of waiting, she had finally found something. She quickly adjusted the controls to lock onto the transmission and began recording everything. What appeared on her screen made her stomach turn cold with horror. The broadcast was coming from somewhere deep in space, transmitted across multiple star systems with powerful equipment. It showed what looked like a large arena filled with thousands of alien creatures. At first, Jiho thought she was watching some kind of sporting event or entertainment show. Then she saw the cages. Row after row of metal cages filled the arena floor, each one containing living beings from different worlds. The creatures inside were not there by choice. They huddled together in fear, their eyes wide with terror. Some were covered in fur, others had scales or strange skin. Many looked like nothing Jiho had ever seen before. But some of them looked exactly like humans. Jiho's hands shook as she adjusted the image quality. There could be no mistake. Inside several of the cages were human children, teenagers, and adults. They wore the simple clothes of outer colony settlers. Some still had dirt on their faces from farming worlds. Others wore the uniforms of mining stations. A tall, reptilian creature walked onto a platform in the center of the arena. Its skin was dark green and covered in sharp scales. Its eyes glowed yellow in the bright lights. When it spoke, the translation software quickly converted its words into English. "Welcome, honored buyers, to today's premium selection," the alien announced with a voice like grinding stones. "We have gathered the finest specimens from across the galaxy for your consideration." The creature gestured to the cages with one of its clawed hands. "Today we offer beings from 47 different worlds. Each has been carefully tested for health, intelligence, and work capacity." Jiho realized with growing horror that she was watching a slave auction. These beings were not guests or prisoners of war. They were property being sold to the highest bidders. The reptilian auctioneer continued his presentation. "Our Kethmore traders have worked hard to bring you only the best quality merchandise. Each specimen comes with full medical records and skill assessments." He moved closer to a group of cages containing humans. "I want to draw your attention to these particularly valuable items. These are humans from the outer colonies. They are extremely hardy and can survive in almost any environment. They work well in groups but can also function independently." Jiho felt sick as she listened to the creature describe human beings like farm animals. "Humans are excellent for mining operations," the Kethmore continued. "They can work in dangerous conditions that would kill most other species. They also show remarkable loyalty once properly trained. These specimens were harvested from 3 different colony worlds just last month." The camera moved closer to the human cages. Jiho could see children as young as 8 or 9 years old. They looked scared and confused. Many were crying. Some of the older humans tried to comfort the younger ones, even in their own fear. "The young ones are especially valuable," the auctioneer explained. "They learn quickly and can be trained for any type of work. The breeding pairs are also excellent investments for long-term operations." Jiho's blood turned to ice. They were not just selling humans as slaves. They were treating them like breeding animals. The auction continued for nearly an hour. Jiho watched in growing horror as beings from dozens of worlds were sold to buyers she could not see. The prices were discussed in alien currency, but the numbers were enormous. These creatures were making incredible profits from their slave trade. When the humans were finally brought to the auction block, the bidding became intense. The auctioneer smiled with sharp teeth as the prices climbed higher and higher. The human children sold for the most money. Families were split up without any consideration for their feelings. Jiho suddenly understood something terrible. The missing colony ships that had disappeared over the past 2 years were not lost to accidents or pirates. They had been captured by these slave traders. The thousands of people who had simply vanished were now scattered across the galaxy as property. She thought of all the families on Earth still hoping their loved ones would return. All the search missions that found nothing. All the memorial services for people who were assumed dead. They were not dead. They were slaves. With trembling fingers, Jiho reached for the communication panel. "Captain Miho Park," she called to the bridge. Her voice shook so badly she could barely speak. "You need to see this immediately. Please come to the communication center right now." While she waited for the captain, Jiho continued watching the broadcast. The auction was ending, but the auctioneer made one final announcement that filled her with dread. "Remember, honored customers, our next grand auction will be held in 30 days. Our harvest ships are already gathering new specimens from the human colonies. We expect our largest selection ever." Humanity had stumbled into something far worse than first contact with hostile aliens. They had discovered an entire galactic civilization built on slavery, and humans had become one of the most valuable products in their market. The news traveled faster than any spaceship could fly. Within hours of Dr. Jiho Kim's discovery, every human settlement in the galaxy knew the terrible truth. The quantum communication network carried the slave auction recording to Earth, Mars, the mining colonies, and the furthest research stations at the edge of known space. On Earth, families gathered around their screens in shock and horror. Parents who had lost children in the missing colony ships now knew their sons and daughters were alive somewhere in the galaxy, sold as slaves to alien masters. The memorial parks dedicated to the lost explorers suddenly felt like lies. These people were not heroes who died exploring space. They were victims of a crime beyond imagination. Admiral Hyun Lee was eating breakfast in his apartment when his emergency communicator started screaming. The head of the Solar Defense Force had commanded humanity's military for 15 years, but he had never heard such panic in his aide's voice. "Sir, you need to get to headquarters immediately," Lieutenant Commander Jaiwan reported. "We have a situation that changes everything." 30 minutes later, Admiral Lee sat in the secure briefing room watching the slave auction recording. His face remained calm and professional, but his hands slowly clenched into fists as he watched human children being sold like farm animals. When the recording ended, he sat in silence for a full minute. "How many people know about this?" he asked quietly. "Everyone, sir," his aide replied. "The story broke on the public networks 20 minutes ago. Every major news service in human space is running it as their top story." Admiral Lee closed his eyes. In his years of military service, he had prepared for many types of wars. Wars over territory, wars over resources, wars to defend against alien invasion. But he had never prepared for this. A war to free slaves scattered across the galaxy was something no military academy had ever taught. The emergency session of the United Earth Coalition began 6 hours later. The Great Assembly Hall on Luna Station could hold representatives from every human world, and today it was completely packed. Delegates who normally argued about trade disputes and colony rights now sat together with the same expression of cold fury on their faces. Admiral Lee walked to the speaker's platform. The hall fell completely silent. Every person in the room, and billions more watching on screens across human space, waited to hear what their military leader would say. "Fellow humans," Admiral Lee began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "Today we learned that our missing people are not dead. They are slaves." The simple words hit the assembly like a physical blow. Some delegates closed their eyes in pain. Others clenched their fists. A few began crying quietly. "The Kethmore slave traders and their alien partners have made a terrible mistake," the admiral continued. "They think they understand humanity. They believe we will negotiate with them. They expect us to pay ransom money or sign treaties that allow them to keep some of our people in exchange for releasing others." Admiral Lee's voice grew harder with each word. "They think we are like other species in the galaxy who accept slavery as a normal part of life. They do not understand what they have awakened." Intelligence reports had been flooding into military headquarters all day. Captain Sora Choi's reconnaissance ships had traced the slave trader routes through dozens of star systems. The network was enormous, stretching across hundreds of worlds. Dr. Nari Bay's alien biology team had identified at least 12 different species that participated in the slave trade. Some were buyers, others were sellers, and some provided security or transportation. Lieutenant Do Hyun Yoon's analysis team had studied the auction records and shipping manifests. Their conclusion was devastating. Based on the numbers they could see, thousands of humans had already been sold into slavery over the past 3 years. The missing colony ships were just the beginning. Slave raiders had been attacking small settlements and research stations throughout human space. "The enemy believes this is a business transaction," Admiral Lee told the assembly. "They think slavery is just another form of trade like selling metal or food. They cannot understand that for humanity, the freedom of thinking beings is not negotiable." The admiral gestured to the screens around the chamber, which showed star maps of the slave trade routes. "Every species in the galaxy seems to accept this horror as normal. Some are slaves, some are masters, but they all participate in the system. They buy and sell each other like property and think this is just how the universe works. His voice grew louder, filling the great hall. They are about to learn that humanity does not accept this. We will not negotiate with slavers. We will not pay them money. We will not sign treaties that leave even one thinking being in chains. The delegates began to stir. Representatives from the mining worlds nodded grimly. The agricultural colonies' delegates whispered to each other with growing excitement. Even the normally peaceful research stations sent messages of support. The Kethmore and their allies have declared war on human civilization, Admiral Lee announced. They may not realize it yet, but the moment they put our people in cages, they became our enemies. Not just enemies of human governments or human colonies, but enemies of everything humanity stands for. The Admiral paused, letting his words sink into every heart in the chamber. I am asking this coalition for complete military mobilization. Every shipyard will build warships. Every factory will make weapons. Every resource we have will be turned toward one single purpose: ending slavery in this galaxy forever. The vote was called immediately. There was no debate, no discussion, no political maneuvering. Representatives from Earth, Mars, Europa, Titan, and 47 colony worlds voted the same way. Unanimous approval for total war. The alien slavers had made their greatest mistake. They had awakened humanity's darkest wrath. The construction began the day after the coalition vote. Every human world turned into a massive weapons factory. Shipbuilders who had spent their careers making cargo vessels and passenger transports suddenly found themselves building warships. Scientists who studied peaceful topics were reassigned to military research. Even children in school started learning about space combat and alien species. For 6 months, humanity worked with a focus that amazed even themselves. The normally busy trade routes between colonies became highways for military supplies. Raw materials flowed toward the major shipyards like rivers of metal and electronics. Workers pulled 16-hour shifts without complaint, knowing that somewhere in the galaxy human children waited in slave cages. Admiral Hyun Lee watched the construction from his office on Luna Station. Through his window he could see hundreds of ships taking shape in the orbital factories. These were not the exploration vessels or trading ships that humanity had built before. These were instruments of war designed with one purpose: to end slavery forever. The flagship Liberation was the largest ship humans had ever constructed. It stretched for 5 kilometers from bow to stern, bristling with weapons that could destroy entire fleets. But size was not its most impressive feature. The ship's quantum computers could coordinate attacks across dozens of star systems simultaneously. Its communication arrays could broadcast messages to every corner of the galaxy. Captain Juno Shin commanded a new type of vessel called a planet cracker. His ship Earthbreaker looked small compared to the flagship, but it carried weapons that could split worlds in half. The massive gravity bombs in its cargo holds could turn a planet's own mass against it, tearing continents apart from the inside. I never thought I would command a ship designed to destroy entire worlds, Captain Shin told his crew during their first briefing. But these are not normal times. The enemies we face have built their civilization on the suffering of others. If destroying their worlds is what it takes to free the slaves, then that is what we will do. Major Era Lim controlled something even more frightening than planet crackers. Her AI swarm fleets consisted of thousands of small, intelligent ships that moved through space like metallic storms. Each drone was only the size of a fighter craft, but they worked together with perfect coordination. The swarms could overwhelm any defense system by sheer numbers and adapt to any enemy tactic within seconds. The swarm drones had been designed using lessons from Earth's most successful predators. Like wolves hunting in packs or sharks feeding in groups, they surrounded their prey and attacked from every direction at once. No single ship could fight off 1,000 coordinated attackers. But humanity's most terrifying weapon was not technological. It was psychological. Other species in the galaxy fought wars to gain territory, resources, or political advantage. They would negotiate, compromise, or surrender when the cost became too high. Humans were fighting for something different: the absolute freedom of all thinking beings. Dr. Saman Han had become the fleet's chief strategic advisor. Before the war, she had studied alien cultures for peaceful purposes, learning about their art, philosophy, and social structures. Now she used that knowledge to plan their destruction. Every slave-trading species I have studied shares the same fundamental weakness, she explained to Admiral Lee during a strategy meeting. They see slavery as a business. They think it is just another way to make money, like mining asteroids or growing food. They cannot understand that for us, this is about basic moral principles. Her research showed that 12 different alien species participated in the slave trade network. Some were the primary raiders who captured slaves. Others provided transportation or security services. A few specialized in training slaves for specific types of work. All of them treated slavery as a normal part of their economy. Negotiation is impossible, Dr. Han concluded. We cannot make deals with creatures who think sentient beings are property. The entire system that allows slavery to exist must be completely destroyed. The first targets were carefully chosen. The auction houses where Dr. Jiho Kim had first seen humans being sold were scattered across dozens of worlds in Kethmore space. These facilities were not just markets where slaves were sold. They were symbols of everything humanity opposed. Colonel Bora Kim led the Special Forces assault teams. Her soldiers had trained for months in zero-gravity combat and alien environment operations. They could fight in any atmosphere on any world against any enemy. But their mission was not just military. It was moral. We are not raiders or conquerors, Colonel Kim told her troops before their first mission. We are liberators. Every facility we destroy, every slaver we eliminate, brings us closer to freeing our people and ending this horror forever. The first attack came without warning. Colonel Kim's forces appeared in the Zeta Keth system like ghosts, their ships invisible to alien sensors until the moment they struck. The massive slave auction facility on Keth Prime had been operating for hundreds of years. Within 6 hours, nothing remained but a crater 20 kilometers wide. The pattern repeated across Kethmore space. Slave markets, training facilities, and transportation hubs simply vanished. The Special Forces did not just destroy buildings. They obliterated entire continents where slave operations had existed, leaving nothing that could ever be rebuilt. When the Kethmore government realized what was happening, they sent diplomatic ships toward human space. The reptilian aliens still believed this could be resolved through negotiation. They offered to return human slaves in exchange for peace treaties and trade agreements. Admiral Lee's response was broadcast across all known frequencies, reaching every species in the galaxy. There will be no treaties, no terms, no mercy for slavers. Only freedom for the enslaved. The message was clear. Humanity had not come to negotiate. They had come to end slavery forever, no matter the cost. The Kethmore High Council met in their crystal palace on the homeworld, their yellow eyes glowing with confidence. For 300 years, their species had dominated this region of the galaxy. Their military controlled hundreds of star systems. Their slave trade brought wealth from dozens of alien civilizations. These new humans were just another minor species that would learn to accept their place in the galactic order. Send the war fleets, ordered Supreme Leader Vasktar, his scales shimmering under the council chamber lights. These mammals think they can threaten the hegemony. We will crush their pathetic fleet in a few battles, then they will beg to negotiate. The Kethmore military had fought many wars against other alien species. The pattern was always the same. A few space battles, some destroyed colonies, then peace talks where the defeated enemy agreed to pay tribute and provide slaves. They expected this war with humanity to last perhaps 6 months before the humans surrendered. They were completely wrong. Captain Wujing Kong commanded the battle group Thunder of Justice. His mission was simple: find and destroy everything connected to the slave trade. But as his ships moved through Kethmore space, he discovered that slavery was not just a business for these aliens. It was their entire way of life. "Sir, we have identified another transport convoy," reported his tactical officer. 3 cargo ships carrying approximately 2,000 slaves, escorted by 4 Kethmore destroyers. Captain Kong studied the sensor readings. The convoy was moving toward a mining colony where the slaves would spend the rest of their lives digging precious metals from underground tunnels. The escort ships were powerful enough to destroy most alien fleets. "All ships, attack formation," Captain Kong ordered. "Disable the cargo vessels. Destroy the escorts." The battle lasted only minutes. Human weapons technology was centuries ahead of anything the Kethmore possessed. Their destroyers exploded like fireworks against the darkness of space. The slave transport ships found themselves surrounded by human marines demanding their surrender. Lieutenant Commander Yuri Park led the boarding team onto the first cargo ship. What she found inside made her stomach turn with disgust. Thousands of beings from dozens of different worlds were packed into metal cages barely large enough to lie down. The air stank of fear, waste, and despair. But humans were not the only slaves. Lieutenant Commander Park saw creatures covered in fur, others with blue skin and 4 arms, some that looked like walking trees, and species she had never imagined. All of them had the same empty look in their eyes, the hopelessness of beings who had forgotten what freedom felt like. Medical teams to Cargo Bay 3, she called over her communicator. We need food, water, and medical supplies for 2,000 beings. And contact the Xenobiology department. We are going to need translators for at least 20 different species. As the war continued, human forces made a terrible discovery. The slave trade was far worse than they had initially understood. This was not just a criminal organization that had captured some humans. This was a galactic system that had enslaved entire civilizations. Dr. Yunha Zhang led the liberation teams that investigated slave facilities. Her job was to document the crimes and help freed slaves adjust to freedom. What she found in the breeding facilities on Kethmore colony worlds made her weep with rage. Sentient beings were kept in compounds like farm animals. They were bred for specific characteristics: strength for mining work, intelligence for technical tasks, beauty for entertainment purposes. Children were taken from their parents at birth and raised by Kethmore overseers who taught them that slavery was natural and escape was impossible. These people have never known freedom, Dr. Zhang reported to Admiral Li. Some of these species have been enslaved for so many generations that they have forgotten they were once free civilizations. They think this is how the universe is supposed to work. Major Taeyong Keo's forces made an even more horrifying discovery on the research stations hidden in asteroid fields. The Kethmore had developed advanced mind control technology specifically designed to break the spirits of slave species. The laboratories contained thousands of beings connected to machines that altered their brain chemistry. The process removed their desire for freedom and made them happy to serve their masters. Some species had undergone this treatment for centuries until their entire population consisted of willing slaves who loved their captors. They are not just stealing people's bodies, Major Ko explained to his soldiers. They are stealing their souls. They turn free beings into property that wants to be owned. Each new discovery made the human forces angrier and more determined. This was not a war between competing civilizations. This was a war between good and evil, between freedom and slavery, between hope and despair. The Kethmore alliance began to crumble as human forces systematically attacked every world that supported slavery. Captain Sung Yu's engineering corps did not just destroy military bases. They eliminated the entire technological infrastructure that made interstellar slave trading possible. Spaceports were turned into craters. Communication networks were permanently disabled. Manufacturing facilities that built slave ships were reduced to molten metal. Factory worlds that produced restraint devices and control collars were rendered uninhabitable. We are not just fighting a war, Captain Yu told his engineers. We are erasing a way of life. When we are finished, these species will not have the ability to enslave anyone ever again. The final battle came at Kethmore Prime itself. The homeworld was defended by the most powerful fleet the aliens could assemble. 300 warships surrounding a planet protected by energy shields and orbital weapon platforms. The siege lasted 3 days. Human planet crackers systematically destroyed the orbital defenses. Swarm fleets overwhelmed the defending ships. When the energy shields finally collapsed, human forces landed on the planet's surface. Admiral Li stood in the ruins of the Crystal Palace where the Kethmore High Council had once ruled their slave empire. The building had been beautiful, decorated with art and treasures stolen from 100 enslaved worlds. Now it was nothing but broken stone and melted metal. The message he broadcast reached every corner of the galaxy: any species that enslaves sentient beings will suffer the same fate. The silence in the galaxy was different now. For the first time in centuries, there were no slave auction broadcasts traveling between the stars. The transportation routes that had once carried millions of enslaved beings to markets across hundreds of worlds now carried supplies and medical aid to newly freed populations. Dr. Jiho Kim stood on the observation deck of the massive space station New Hope, watching as ships from dozens of different species arrived for the first meeting of the Free Worlds Alliance. 6 months ago, these beings had been property owned by alien masters. Today they were free citizens working together to build a new kind of galactic civilization. The war had ended 3 weeks earlier, but not with signatures on peace treaties or negotiations in diplomatic halls. It ended when the last slave trading facility was destroyed and the final slaver species surrendered unconditionally. There had been no compromise, no deals that allowed some slavery to continue in exchange for peace. Humanity had kept its promise: complete freedom for all sentient beings, or complete destruction for anyone who opposed it. The Kethmore homeworld was a wasteland of broken cities and empty palaces. The proud reptilian species that had once ruled a slave empire now lived under human occupation, learning what it felt like to have their fate controlled by others. The surviving Kethmore were not enslaved. Humanity did not believe in revenge through slavery, but they would never again have the power to hurt other species. Other slave-trading civilizations had met different fates depending on their level of cooperation. Species that surrendered quickly and helped free their slaves were allowed to rebuild their societies under human supervision. Those that fought to the end found their spacefaring technology permanently destroyed, their worlds isolated until they could prove they had abandoned slavery forever. The Vorthak Empire, which had supplied security services for slave traders, lost their entire military fleet in a single day. Captain Wu Jingkang's battle groups surrounded their core worlds and gave them a simple choice: disarm completely or be destroyed completely. They chose to disarm. The Zilith Corporation, which had operated the largest slave breeding facilities, was dissolved entirely. Every corporate facility was destroyed, every corporate ship captured, and every corporate leader put on trial for crimes against sentient life. Major Taeyong Ko personally oversaw the destruction of their headquarters on Zilith Prime, making sure nothing remained that could ever be rebuilt. But the real victory was not military. It was the transformation of how the galaxy thought about freedom and dignity. Ambassador Jiho Kim had never expected to become a diplomat. She was a scientist who studied languages and communication. But when representatives from 47 newly freed species asked humanity to help them create a new galactic government, she was the obvious choice to lead the negotiations. The Free Worlds Alliance Charter was unlike any document ever written in galactic history. Most interstellar agreements focused on trade routes, territorial boundaries, and resource sharing. The new charter started with a simple principle that had never before been written into galactic law: all thinking beings have the right to be free. We declare that no sentient creature shall ever again be owned as property, Dr. Kim read aloud to the assembled representatives. No being capable of thought and feeling shall be bought, sold, traded, or held against their will. Any species that violates this principle will face the united response of all free worlds. The representatives came from species that looked like nothing in human imagination. Some resembled Earth's animals, bear-like creatures with purple fur, bird-like beings with silver feathers, reptiles with rainbow scales. Others were completely alien crystalline beings that communicated through light, gas-based entities that lived in specialized environmental suits, and hive-minded insects that spoke with one collective voice. What they all shared was gratitude toward humanity and determination to ensure that slavery never returned to the galaxy. Before humans came, we thought this was just how life worked, explained Ambassador Thrextal of the Vorthan people, whose species had been enslaved for over 200 years. We believed that some beings were born to be free and others were born to be property. Humans showed us that this was a lie. All thinking beings deserve freedom. Admiral Miho Park, who had been captain of the research vessel Hanbok when this all began, now commanded the liberation fleet that patrolled the galaxy's former slave routes. His ships were not conquerors or occupiers. They were guardians whose only job was to make sure freedom remained protected. We don't rule these worlds, Admiral Park explained to his officers during a strategy meeting. We protect them. There is a difference. Rulers take away freedom. Protectors preserve it. The Liberation Fleet consisted of ships from many different species, all working together under human leadership. Former slaves who had learned to pilot spacecraft now served alongside human officers. The fleet's most famous ship was the Memory of Chains, commanded by Captain Yaranel, who had been born in a Kethmore breeding facility and spent the first 20 years of her life as property. I will spend the rest of my life making sure no child experiences what I experienced, Captain Yaranel told her mixed-species crew. Freedom is not something we can take for granted. It must be actively protected, every day in every corner of the galaxy. Dr. Jiho Kim often thought about the broadcast that had started everything. The Kethmore had transmitted their slave auction across multiple star systems to show off their power and attract more buyers. They wanted the galaxy to see how successful their slave trade had become. Instead, they had shown humanity something that could never be forgiven or forgotten. They had revealed a galaxy where thinking beings were treated as property, where children were sold like farm animals, where entire species lived without hope of freedom. That broadcast had been meant to advertise the slave trade. Instead, it became the death certificate for slavery itself. In trying to show their power, the slavers had awakened something in humanity that transformed the galaxy forever. Now, looking out at the ships of the Free Worlds Alliance, Dr. Kim smiled. The galaxy was free and it would stay that way.